My life had started going that way at about 8. At a certain time of the evening, the family left the center room, the living room of the house. My mother and my sisters, or my sisters themselves, would go up to bed upstairs, where I used to go to bed, upstairs. I had to go down to the basement. And an 8-year-old child had a tough time differentiating the reason in that. Why am I going to the basement? I'm going to hell, they're going to heaven.
And what were...
I wanted to kill my mother since I was 8 years old, and I'm not proud of that. A month later, I'm up living with my grandparents in the mountains, and 10 months later, I murdered them. It made it worse to be on top of a mountain. I was literally on top of a mountain when it happened. And I sensed everybody in the world just stopping what they were doing, turning around, saw what I did, and are coming to get me. And I knew I was paranoid at that moment. I knew anybody that came up there and gave me a funny look or a fishy eye or quizzical look, I'd have blown their brains out thinking they were coming to get me. And if it had been in a city, I would have been a mass murderer at age 15. I would have killed until they gunned me down. I wouldn't have been able to reason my way out of it. I was scared to death, and I was violent. I felt my back hit that wall. I was the rabbit that always ran, that always backed away, always burned his bridges. And suddenly there weren't any more. And my back hit that wall, and I came out screaming and kicking and shooting. From my point of view, what I saw was there was a great hole in my life. There was a lot missing from my life, and it didn't necessarily mean feelings. It meant I had walled off this emptiness in my life. Okay, I had an upbringing that was some have called dysfunctional. Okay, parents divorced when I was young. My mother started drinking heavily. She was working to raise 3 kids. We were not being cooperative about it. She drank more. She punished us harder, probably out of desperation. So character sets were being developed at that point. Rather than me going to Boy Scouts and getting achievement badges, I was not going to Boy Scouts and not getting achievement badges. I was finding devious ways to get around the rules of the home. Because the whole home life, I watched it deteriorate from what typical kids on the block were doing to coming home from school that I didn't like anyway. And ironically, I have a high IQ. I didn't know that till I was locked up the first time for murder. I always thought I was a little missing up here, a little short. Because I was always called stupid, I was called slow, don't you think when you do things? That was the problem. I wasn't thinking when I did things. I just did by rote, I did by memory, I did by example. And I had absolutely no faith in myself at all. I had no interaction going on in my own mind. I was not a thinker. I was not an individual. I'm through a dysfunctional childhood and hasn't gotten violent yet or is heading toward that direction. Passive aggressive. Violence was the last thing I exhibited, and then it was murderous violence. Okay, so sure, there's, right? And any psych out there, any professional out there is going to tell you, I think, that if they are going into my mind, into my past, into my feelings, that there's a potential there for acting out or getting uncontrolled or being violent, because they're stripping away the veneer of my civilization. They're stripping away the veneer of the protections of myself. And there's a lot of things that can come jumping out of there. And then to walk out of that therapy session into this kind of a setting, prison, where it's very violent, it's very aggressive, it's a distilled kind of medium that you might encounter on a street corner somewhere, the street corner thug, the street corner punk, or the alleyway where someone is going to take terrible advantage of you or put you in a terrible situation that you may have to be violent to get out of. That's this main line. I mean, that's where all these guys go. And I'm going to walk out of a therapy session where this man has been peeling my mind, so to speak, and getting into my psyche and my soul and finding out what makes me tick or trying to help put me back together or help try to put me together for the first time. And then I'm going to walk out of that into this medium. That's not very conducive to good health. I'm aware of that going into the situation. So I'm twice as leery as the doctor is. But unfortunately, he's got all of these mindsets and these theories and these books he's read and that he's trained under. And I guess what has happened in my life kind of jumps out of the book a few chapters ahead. And the way I've experienced it, the psychs don't want to go that far. They don't want to come out there and work the pages back into the book so that I fit in there too. Or my kind, where I'm learning to achieve. I've developed a better image of self and those around me, and I really started cooking. I started doing things, real positive. I felt good about it. And that continued on to the streets. I went to the JCs on the streets, But as my relationship, I was paroled to my mother, okay? What these experts don't notice in the picture, I haven't seen it in writing anywhere, it could be somewhere, that when I was 14 years old, I ran away from my mother. They mention that. But if you look at it in the overall picture, why did I run away? I wanted to be with my father. That's a very topical approach to it. I wanted to get away from my mother because I was dreaming, thinking, fantasizing murder all day long. I couldn't get it out of my head. She and I couldn't battle with her because I was very intimidated by her. She's 6 feet tall, she weighs 2 1/4, 225 pounds. She's not a fat woman, she's just this great big woman who I was terrified of. She had verbal capabilities you wouldn't believe. I used to watch her field strip grown men in emotional little contests. And when they get to a point where they wanted to smack her, then she started attacking them on beating women. Oh, slap the woman around, you know. And then she'd toy with them on that. And I'd watch these guys dance around the room having fits, knocking out windows, punch a hole in the door, and stomp off. And she could control people like that. I'm sitting there watching that in awe from the one point of view and in terror from the other. I grew up with this stuff. She did that to my dad when they were always battling before the divorce. I'm not trying to put on her what happened to the girls or to her, but I'm saying there was a lot of psychological involvement there.
Did you feel early on?
They went off into some real morbid or negative fascination, rated that need or vacated it, and they let it go. I didn't. The adult wasn't there. My mother was there, and she was there to beat me. She was there to humiliate me. She was there to use me as an example of how inferior men are. And that was a great little lady there. She kind of preceded this female movement we have now of getting rights, of getting equal rights, of getting equal standing, of getting equal presence in various theaters.
But actually you had experimented
Oh, I was finding out the hard way what women's rights and women's antagonism. I mean, women are drove about things like that. They get upset about the belittlements they get and the lack of equal equality that they experience. Unfortunately, my mother developed, and it's not fair to talk about a dead person that way. They can't defend themselves. They can't give you another perspective on what really happened. I can only surmise to try to be fair. Looking back on it, I'm seeing that she was making an effort to balance her pain with what she was experiencing. And if you look at her dad, he's a wimp. He never did anything. Mom did everything, you know, so she orientated toward her. So she comes out doing that stuff. I find out in sociological studies and psychological studies, that's normal. Not necessarily healthy, but that happens. And my dad, being the wimp out of his family, goes and finds my mom, who's the dynamo out of her family, and they get married, and it'll either work or it won't. And in his case, it didn't work because she kept hammering on him. She wanted him to change this. She wanted him to change that, and he couldn't handle that. After 13 years, he'd had enough. What I resented was I had a mother, I had a father. Father worked, he brought in a big paycheck. We had a nice house, we had friends, we went to school, right? We had birthdays, we had Christmas, we had vacations. He had Saturday night with the poker buddies out in the guest house by the garage. We were living pretty good. And she absolutely hated that. This stereotypical response of this deadhead, this muttonhead she's married to, of wanting to go out and play cards in a smoke-filled room, drinking beer and with these old war buddies. See, I had another problem. My father was in the 1st Special Service Force in World War II. I got it in the legs. One time I turned around shrieking and she hit me in the mouth, and the little keeper on the clasp flew off, little silver buckle thing. And she smacked me. This thing breaks off on my mouth, right? And she hits me across the face with this belt and says, "Shut up, the neighbors are going to think I'm beating you." I'm looking at her, what? You know? I'm not supposed to cry out, which is a natural reaction to these great red welts that are going on me. I was a little shit. I got rude downstairs. She took me upstairs and beat the hell out of me. I would like to think it was a better part of my character that was resisting this kind of pressure to fit into some mold that she had the image of as being the good little kid. I'll be damned if I'm going to be that good little kid. I'm getting the hell beat out of me for not being that little kid. I got I don't know what you call it, resistant to it. But again, it's not in manly ways or in prideful ways. It was sneaky, little devious ways. I'd get around that. And one of the ways was she won't give me an allowance. I'll take money out of her purse. I never robbed her, took all of it. I'd take a dime here, a quarter there, 15 cents there, 50 cents here. She comes in drunk at night. She's not going to know how much change she has. So to rebound on that, she started counting her money at all kinds of odd times to keep on top of me. And it was like a game we played for years. At the age of 13, she finally lets me go visit my father, okay, down in LA, where I was born. I'm in Montana where she was born. I don't like Montana. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, it's miserable, and the people up there are nice people, but hey, they're not my people. That's what I'm saying now. I wasn't viewing or voicing those things then. I was feeling them, but I didn't know how to put them into words. So I finally get to come down and see my dad again, down in LA, all right, 1 month. I never touched her purse again. That scared her. That really bothered her because she'd beat me halfway senseless with that belt, trying to impress, and terror tactics. Okay, we're going to eat dinner and I'm going to beat your ass afterwards, so I can think about it for a half hour. Or after some little thing she's doing. And she tried psychological tactics. She tried, I'm going to put you in an orphanage, I'm going to disavow you, and none of that shit worked. So I go see my dad for 30 days. And my stepbrother and I, we go out and mow lawns. We say, gee, Dad, you're going out to dinner tonight, can we go someplace and eat? And he says, sure, he'd give us a few dollars. We'd go down to some little diner down the street. He treated us like little men, like he wanted to be treated by he came from a matriarchal household too. I guess if you know how that stuff runs in families, right? Matriarchal household, the son goes out and finds a mother image and marries her. I didn't know all this stuff back then. It would have made a lot more sense, right? But I got this domineering grandmother on my father's side. I got this domineering grandmother on my mother's side who died before I was born, but now she's reincarnated in my mother and her sister, my aunt. They're two very domineering, very aggressive, very successful women. Okay, so these two women are in terrible conflict with each other, competition, and they didn't get along at all. All right, so I'm in the middle of that, trying to find my way, and I go stay with my dad, and I can only say he reflected back on his childhood and said, gee, I wish I'd been treated this way. So that's how he treated me and my stepbrother, and we responded to that. We'd go, if we needed spending money, we would go out and we'd do tasks around the neighborhood, clean yards, rake this, mow that, water the flowers, and make a few dollars, and we'd have some fun. Okay, and then sometimes he'd ask us to do something. We'd do it because he was always fair with us and kind, and he was generous with us. So 30 days of doing this opened up whole new feelings in me that I'd never had before. And I wish I'd had more experience with my father growing up, so I could orient more to being tall around not tall peers. There was I call it an artificial paranoia that developed. Why walk into a room, everybody stops and looks at me because I'm the tallest guy they've seen or the tallest guy in the room. They stop and they look. And ironically, the average or short guy is sitting over there looking at me with a great resentment because he wants that attention. I've got it. He thinks it's really neat because he's looking at it from a vicarious position. He doesn't realize that there's thorny sides to that attention. I don't want that attention. I want to just blend into the room. I just want to kind of sidle in. So I see two kinds of tall men or tall male or tall female personalities. Those who are very passive because of all of this thrust on them, or who are very aggressive and they use that and they apply it towards ends. Like the little guy who goes out and becomes the bank president and he's the champion this and did that and never saw the fourth grade. Yeah, because he's real aggressive because he's denied all those little attentions. He has to grab them and he has to go out and put himself in the limelight. I get it naturally, so there's resentment. And little guys tormented me all the time I'm growing up.
Did you feel like an outsider, an outcast
Always.
early on?
Nothing good could come of that.
And you had also a great admiration for John Wayne at the time.
He looked a lot like my dad. And he acted a lot like my dad. My dad was kind of a big, loud guy. Actually, John Wayne was 6'4", had very little tiny feet. My dad was 6'7". He had little tiny feet. And you notice how comedians, when they imitate how John Wayne walked, there's this rambling thing with the hips waving, and they always do this trick. You ever wonder why? he didn't just pick that way to walk. I found, quite by accident, that very big men with very little feet, who have abnormally small feet, have a tough time balancing, and it's a little balancing act they're going through. I went to Grauman's Chinese Theater after it was renamed, and I went and checked all those different footprints out, and here I'd grown up as a kid, not a very tall kid looking at other people being like this, much shorter than me. In my mind's eye, it was all balanced. And when I saw pictures of other kids in me, or other people in me, and there's this great difference, it was always shocking to me too, because I never saw it that way. But here I went, and I watch all these movies and TV programs, and I see these people as being bigger than me because I'm a youth. And then I go to this physical exhibit where it shows their foot size. And I step on John Wayne's boot print with his cowboy boot, and my shoe completely covers it over. It's gone. When I was 14 years old, I had bigger feet than he did. You know? When I was 14 years old, I had bigger feet than my father. I was 6'3½", he's 6'7". He works on a construction site as an electrician. I'm going to junior high school. We go to Kinney's, we get the same kind of Oxford shoes, black Oxfords. I wear a 14½, excuse me. I wear a 12½, he wears a 12. All right? In the mix-up of getting up and going to work and going to school in the morning, he comes running around the house looking for his shoes, he grabs mine. I can't find mine, so I go running around the house and I grab his. And all day long, I'm walking around with these pinched feet. I got blisters developing. He's flopping around at work, half a size too big in his shoe, and he says, "God damn it, got my kid's shoes again." And they're all saying, "Gee, Big Ed, you know, your kid, you got his shoes on and you're flopping around in them?" And he thought that was great. Well, that was a big laugh, right? Hey, I was kind of proud of that too, because it's following in Father's footsteps. When I was 14 years old, I put his old Army jacket on, his Class A uniform. I put his jacket on, and if I had pulled my shoulders forward, I would have ripped it right up the back, because I had broader shoulders than he had. My head's larger than his is. I have a very large head. I wear an 8 3/4 helmet for a motorcycle. I was 15 years old when I went there.
To go back before that time, when you ran away from your mother and went to your grandmother.
No, went to my father.
Yes, but afterwards,
yeah.
When you went to your grandmother, you were 14, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you feel you had to kill her?
That was an outburst. It wasn't felt I had to. I went up there hoping. I didn't go there for one thing. I got left there. We went there for Christmas from my father's in LA. We went up to the mountains to stay for Christmas, and I got left behind. I was having friction with my stepbrother and my stepmother. There was problems there. We were vying for his interests, vying for his love. They were desperate because they're the new family. I'm desperate because I've never had the man of my life. I wanted my father's love. I wanted his approval. I wanted his recognitions. And we all got very greedy and desperate at that time, so we fought each other a lot. And it was a lot of friction, and he couldn't handle that, so he got rid of me. I was old family. I was already failure, so, you know, I got parked up in the mountains. There was a lot of dressing on it, and window dressing and things, but I was up there with them for 10 months. At first it was okay, because it was the calm of being away from Montana. There wasn't the hellish stuff. I was going to a good school. As the months went on, the veneer went away. My grandmother had made agreements with me from the gate that she wouldn't get into little humiliating mind games with me like my mother and stepfather had done, right? And I agreed I wouldn't do certain things, and then this mind game stuff started up. She decides she's going to raise me like she raised her 3 sons, and she's going to get rid of all this negative crap that my mother put on me. She's recognizing it as something my mother put on me, and I don't know that it wasn't. Some of it was, but a lot of it was my inability to deal with complex, critical, psychological situations. I could not deal with them. So I resisted it. I ran away. That was my answer, to run. I ran from the people in Montana. I ran from my mother in Montana. I let my father park me up there to get away from the strife in LA. Now I'm stuck. All the bridges are burned because my grandparents are there 24 hours a day. I can't run from them. She never let me get out of her sight for more than an hour without yelling my name out to see where I was. She was convinced I wanted to go down the mountain into town, Little North Fork, to hang around with kids, rowdies and stuff. and be a juvenile delinquent. So she would never let me go down there on my own. She'd never let me leave the property. And it started simmering, I guess. Started building the passions and the tension. I started developing the fantasies toward her from my mother, killing her. And in the decapitation fantasies were even there. They were in place by then already. And
what were those fantasies?
What were they?
Yes.
Possessing the severed heads of women. Men didn't turn me on. That wasn't I couldn't appreciate the appearances of a guy.
Select your victims. Were there?
I didn't select them. It was random. And it was also the development of the passion. If I was drove, they died. Like the last two victims. And here I've been fighting my inner impulses to not go off on this woman and her 12-year-old son who's hitchhiking clear back to Seattle, right? And I'm struggling with these feelings. I don't want to do it. Man, you ought to do it anyway. You're weak. You're a punk. I don't want to do it. All day long I'm doing this. And by the time I'm coming back down that highway, I'm exhausted. I'm saying, oh, whoa. And I'm driving along just to get home. And here's a perfect situation. I cannot get busted. It exceeds the criterion of picking someone up and not getting caught. No one knows me in the county. No one's seen me going through it, right? It's a fog-shrouded night. Nobody could even see me if their home was in view. And I don't know them. I picked them up. We drove into town about 2 miles, 3 miles. I dropped them off. I got some gas and kept right on going. I was not in a proper state of mind to do something like that. It blew me away. I couldn't believe it. It was like it was handed to me on a platter. It scared the hell out of me. I couldn't do it. I had everything I needed.
To go back to your first...
Again, so about the selection and the preparation. If I was selecting and preparing and everything was all set, that's it. I got them. But I didn't. They're not dead. I show that as an example of many times that kind of thing happened. All of a sudden, somebody shows up out of nowhere. I pick them up, take them where they're going, but I didn't do nothing to them because it was the mindset was all wrong. The only time people got killed was when she and I was fighting like cats and dogs, and I couldn't deal with it. I couldn't vent it any other way. I look back on it, and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm just saying I'm looking back on it and saying, I think they were surrogates. I was killing her, not them. I was attacking her station. I was attacking things. It was, it's disgusting, but it was kind of a power trip. I always felt intimidated by women. I always felt overpowered by them as a kid. When I stopped making it as an adult, when I was doing great socially on the job base, making friends locally, having buddies and stuff, and have a pizza and a beer and stuff, no problem. I got friends for that. But making women friends was real tough. And battling my mom on the one hand and trying to make friends with women is a little bit of a problem because there was a lot of crossover there. And she was opening a lot of old wounds, pushing a lot of buttons, and she liked to watch me twitch. That's the only thing I can say. There was a little bit of sadism in her too. And I hated her for that because she was the one person in the world that could push every button I had because she knew where they all were. And as I got better and smarter and better at what I did and more involved in the public and let's say a better all-around adult, it's as if she were offended by that. And you ask why, okay? Just look at the vanity of being a mother. She raised me, had a horrible time from day one as an individual parent raising me. Fight every day, right? The state comes in, she's a proud woman. She's a vain woman, and she was real proud, and she was raised that way. The state of California takes her son away from her and says, we are taking your son away because you must be an unfit mother. He's a murderer. He killed people. I'm trying to look at it from her point of view. If you could raise your son right, you wouldn't kill people, lady. We're taking him. And in a mere 5.5 years of bureaucracy, and she had nothing. She had no respect for California bureaucracy. She used to make jokes about that all the time. About if you want to waste the rest of your life doing nothing, apply for something, through a bureaucratic process in California. Those bureaucrats took me away from her. And in 5.5 years of filter farbing around, they hand me back, and now I'm an overachiever. Huh? Good-looking, strapping young man, wants to go work, wants to make a living for himself, wants to be sociable. He isn't paranoid and pulling away from people anymore. That shocked the hell out of her. It had to have. She didn't share that with me. but I'm saying that must have really tore at her and made her feel all the more a bad mother. So instead of, I have a feeling she felt she couldn't be a part of that healing process. So she attacked it because I became a cancer in her life. I reminded her every day what a rotten mother she must be. And I'm not saying she was. She must be a rotten mother. Look what the state did for me, and she couldn't. They couldn't have insulted her any worse if they'd have tried, and they didn't try. They were trying to solve a problem by paroling me to her so I'll stay out of trouble and go be a good adult and pay taxes. And guess what? That's the one furnace they should not have put me back in because, hey, she had no help on the other end to sort through her feelings, and she was too proud to get help. So we fought, and that's the only excuse I can make in my head. She's not here to discuss it. That's the only thing the balance I can put in there is that I must have been a terrible accuser to her, a terrible accusal of what a rotten mother she was, or she could have done better. For what it was doing to her. She worked her butt off. They took every bit of it. Oh, yeah, we love that. Okay, here's some more. You want some more authority? You want some more responsibility? Here. It was eating her up. She went into that job. I'm thinking that because it had such a violent effect on her college education, she was that close to going. The other girl, Anita Luchessa, wasn't a hitchhiker. She had been raised by her family. Don't do things like that. That's totally out of line. And her friend talked her into it. And once she got into it and she saw how much fun it was, and they meet the different people and they talk with people, that by the time they're leaving Berkeley, right, it's all about who gets the front seat and who gets the back seat. So she opened the door and asked where I was headed. And it said Stanford right on the sign they were holding up. And I said, I'm going to Palo Alto. I can drop you off. Oh, great. And she jumps in, grabs her stuff, jumps in, opens the back seat up for her friend, who's standing there looking at me long and serious about whether or not, because I could tell at the time, she knows better than to get in. Single adult. It's a coupe instead of a four-door car, so she cannot get out other than through the front seat. My God, I acted in a way that they wouldn't be paranoid because I'm a young man by myself in this car. I diffused the situation as I drove up. I'd gotten practice at that. All that driving around, it wasn't rehearsing. I made a game out of driving around, picking people up, and later on I discerned that some people wouldn't get in my car because of the situation. I'm a young man by myself. It's unsafe. So I thought, well, gee, that kind of put me off. I'm not doing anything to anybody, so I want to see if I can change that situation where they'll want to get in and I can take them where they're going. Because I know I'm not going to do anything. And I got to where I could diffuse that situation. It's how you're looking. If you look, oh boy, I already start cranking the car over there. They're not going to get in your car because they can see you from half a block away drooling. But if you look at your watch and say, geez, I don't know if I have enough time, and you're kind of in the mirror and looking around, and you pull over, this guy's just a businessman going somewhere. Get in his car, we'll go where we're going. And it's little games I played so they'd get in the car. And then we chatted, and I talked about things, and I found out where their orientations were and their what they used to judge and who could get in and who they could get in with and who they couldn't, right? In that sense, it's been interpreted as what do you call it, rehearsing. It's not true. It's like playing chess and then turning it into something ugly. I played chess casually. I played chess more and more thoroughly till I got very good at it, which was picking up people to where I could make you a bet. I can pick up those two ladies, and they'd say, oh man, you're crazy. Those are two very crafty young ladies who won't get in a car with a young man by himself, et cetera, et cetera. And I'd win the bet because I missed it this way, downtown. Trust me, please. And they're sitting like this, and they quit talking to me, and they're looking straight ahead. And I'm saying, oh, shit. Guns under the seat. It's all just, whoa. I get up on the freeway, 2 turnoffs, Mills College. In fact, the next one said Mills College, next exit, But they're not relaxing or nothing. I had refused to take them the way they wanted to go and pushed it the other way. That's what scared them. But they didn't know the irony of it was if I'd have gone along their way, I'd have probably said, yeah, well, I'll just follow on through and oops, we'll do it one more time. How do you oops human lives? I don't know those 2 young ladies, and I don't know where they are today, and I don't know that they remember that little incident. But when I drove them to Mills College, inside of Mills College, to their college entrance, right to the building, to the dormitory, and they got out of that car and flew up those stairs. Never even looked back. I'll bet they quit hitchhiking quite so casually after that. But you know what? I don't think they know to this day how close that came. And the irony of it is,
Just to shut them up and not have them freak out, I could have gone the other way. But by that time, then we're going back up that groove of what I had done already and what I was familiar with. See what I'm saying? And that day, I knew I could not stop doing it. I knew I had no control over it. I had just minimal controls. But mainly, I could not stop it. It was going to happen again. And between that weekend day, it was a Saturday or a Sunday, I think it was a Sunday, between that Sunday and the next Saturday, all that week I was working, I built an image in my head, my mother's going to die. I'm going to kill her, and I am going to go to it with the police, and we're going to hold court in the street, and they're going to pound me in the ground, and they can fill in the blanks because I don't want to be around to explain it. All that week, it was a conviction that just got deeper and deeper in me. I got more and more morose. I got less and less talkative at work. I got more somber about what I was doing because almost every minute of every day, I knew that's what that next weekend held. That was Easter weekend, right? Worked half a day Friday, went back to Santa Cruz Friday afternoon, was drinking Friday night, fell asleep before my mother came home, woke up after she came home. And the last words we had were an argument, right? I walked into her bedroom to chat with her. In the back of my mind, I'm not going to try and blame her for dying. I'm just saying, in the back of my mind, I was hoping she could say something or I'd say something that could stop all of this shit. A little childish hope in the back of my mind that she'd say something and I'd play it off.
But you still went with a hammer.
Wait a minute. You're wiping out the moment here. I went in there hoping I could stop this stuff in the back of my head. I'm not planning on it. I'm just a little hope. And the first thing out of her mouth was she's reading this book and she just flaps it down on herself and says, "Oh my God, I suppose now you want to stay up all night and talk." That was one of her favorite peeves when I come in late at night and want to talk. And once in a long while, like that night, I spun on my heel and said, "Nope, good night," and walked back out. And she knew she'd hurt my feelings. And the next day we'd sit down and talk. Except I knew that we weren't going to talk. And I went back in my room and I laid down. I did not go to sleep. I laid there for 3 hours, 4 hours, till 4, 5 in the morning. A little after 5 in the morning, and walked in there with a hammer. And caved in the side of her head. And cut her.
My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. And I watched the alcohol increase. I watched her social life drop off. I watched her get bizarre. She had terrible pain from her life, earlier life, her upbringing, a failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure. I hate to distill it down into such, into one-word realities like that. There's a lot that leads into that happening, but that is what happened. They represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her, and I was destroying it.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually. I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area, even if just sitting down and talking with a young lady. I need to be able to really communicate, and ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women, and I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing. At first there wasn't a gun. I'm driving along. We go to a vulnerable place where there aren't people watching, where I could act out, and I say, no, I can't. And then a gun is in the car, hidden. And this craving, this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides, this fantastic passion. It was overwhelming me. It was like drugs. It was like alcohol. A little isn't enough. At first it is. And as you adjust to that psychologically and physically, you take more and more and more. It's the same process. So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this gun out? Already realizing if that gun comes out, something has to happen. It was going to happen. I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun that got us all. It was April. And for 2 months I hadn't killed. And I said, it's not going to happen to any more girls. It's got to stay between me and my mother, and it's got to, I can't get away from her. We're still fighting. She's still belittling me. I'm like a puppet on a string, and I entertain her. She knows all my buttons, and I dance like a puppet with that pain. And it had even gotten physical, to where I had physically grabbed her and thrown her onto her bed, trying to emphasize a point that I was threatening to kill her. So here I pick up these two young ladies in Berkeley on Ashby Avenue. One has flowers in her hand, petite little dolls. They're in granny dresses, and they're hitchhiking, a couple of real experts. I want to see how together I am, if I can resist this temptation.
You going to Walnut Creek? Great.
And they get in my car. They want to go one way. I know they need to go the other. If they go the way they're insisting on, we're headed right back out to where the first two co-eds were murdered. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, all I got to do is relax, and they'll take me to their death. I've got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted. As gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college.
Thanks a lot.
That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died, I was going to kill her. And she went out to a party, she got soused, she came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that, came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback, as many thousands of nights before. And she said, oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now. Shit. I looked at her, I said, no. I said, good night. And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold, it's so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly. It hurts. Because I'm not a lizard, I'm not from under a rock. I came out of her vagina. See? I came out of my mother. And in a rage, I went right back in. For 7 years, she said, I haven't had sex with a man because of you, my murderous son. This is one of our arguments. And I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse. I said, there, you know? A 6 young woman dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk.
You know, if you stop and think about it, if I were to have been executed in a timely fashion, they would have had absolutely no input, and they'd be scratching their heads about what makes a serial murderer tick, other than the experts all jumping up to give their opinions, which you've been doing for a lot of years, and unfortunately they don't hit too well. They don't have too good of a track record.
I'm not sure whose name we need to put one specific.
Paul, I said, let's set up a little scenario and act like I'm giving this really incriminating interview that screws everything up, right? And she kind of laughed because it was breaking the tension in the room, you know. So we set up this little scenario, and she's busily acting like she's writing, and I'm talking about all of this harebrained stuff that relates to the case and feelings, and he just starts turning bright red as he gets within hearing range. He's like a big clown, got this huge forehead, hair standing out all over, and now he turns bright red. And he says, mattered in a wet hen. And he stomps into the room and slams his briefcase on the desk, and we all start laughing, and he gets really mad. I said, what are you laughing about? I said, this is a setup just for you. I said, I'm not doing any interviews. But later on, I gave her an interview because she treated me so fairly up to that point, and also had she gave me a pen that day. It was a cast aluminum ballpoint pen. And I took it back to my high security jail cell up in Redwood City. I was really slammed down tight. I'm in a 2-man cell by myself. They have a camera on me 24 hours a day, a monitor, videotape monitor. The lights are on. It's 2 sets of these 4-footers here. And it's as bright as day, all day long, all night long, 24 hours a day. And I was there for 5 months. And I brought this pen back in. I smuggled it in with me. And I get strip shook leaving the cell. I get strip shook coming back in. And I brought this pen in, and it got in with my legal papers. And a few months later, in the middle of the trial, I smashed the pen on the floor with my boot, sharpened it, got a sharp edge on the metal, and slashed my wrist, and was bleeding all over the place. And it was very messy and very exciting, and everybody was dragging me off to the hospital, get sewed up and all of that. And I got maced, shot up with industrial strength bottle of mace. They had about a quart of it, and they just gassed me with that whole thing, and dragged me off to the hospital. And I made a quippy comment. I don't think the police translated it properly for the media because they missed it. They love, how they love to get into puns on broadcast television. They love these little verbal puns and plays with words. And the pen is mightier than the sword. I turned the pen into a sword and cut myself. Both times I attempted suicide, I did it with a pen or parts of a pen. And I thought that was kind of interesting, but the media never picked up on that. They were too busy being serious. But at any rate.
And you said if I wanted to kiss her, I'd have to kill her first.
Yeah, that had been you can imagine how that goes. The deep, dark secrets that one sibling shares with another. It's troubling inside of me, so that was from that period. That a more advanced period where people were still there, they just weren't animate. They could not react or respond to what I was feeling or what I was sharing, because what I was sharing was very embarrassing, very humiliating. It's hard to talk about now, really, because it's obviously it affects how a person feels about himself. But it's not too hard to get around that, because then I look at the wreckage I have behind me, the dead people, caused by my self-indulgence in fantasy life, and then my self-indulgence in not doing something about it, like getting help or taking action against myself even. A lot of people committed suicide at early age, and they don't understand why, and a lot of times, again, by troubled parents and school counselors, they'll water it down into, well, he couldn't adjust and he was having a difficult time, so he took his life. I would not want to say too casually that they're probably pretty lucky he did. Not in every case, not even in most cases, but in some of those cases, you might have had some very inwardly violent young people that they had, on the one hand, the prospect of they're about to act out, and on the other, in a very violent way or a very unsocial and socially abhorrent way. And on the other hand, they keep holding it in, and they say, I can't do that. So they, sometimes they kill themselves. I played with death. One of my favorite tricks back then was to go out and lay in front of in the cars, in the traffic. I'm walking down the sidewalk with a friend, it's a roustabout friend, and we're clowning around about something, and I'll say, hey, check this out, and I'll go lay in the street like a stiff. I'll lay in the street like I got run over. And a car comes driving by, and of course I'm expecting this guy isn't drunk. I'm expecting this guy isn't slightly demented and say, hey, there's a kid laying in front of me. Yeah, it's his fault. Thump, thump, just shift gears going over me. They always stop, and they jump out of the car and get all upset when I get up and walk off or run away. And but it was a little game we played. He didn't go lay in front of the car, so I was doing that. I laugh now because it's embarrassing, but it indicated, I think, how little I thought of myself. I think it indicated that a part of me would rather I got run over right then than I pursue what I was continuing to pursue in my life, because looking at myself and how I was developing inside, nothing good could come of that.
And you had